honestly, anything above freezing, and we make fools of ourselves. I've got the most amazing story to start the happy hour. It's absolutely sensational, and you might be thinking, why are you putting this song, what I'm about to say, but it'll all become clear. We're going to speak to Thomas, who lost his memory when he was hit by a car as a teenager. So it was an accident described by an eyewitness as absolutely horrendous. Over the top of the car, landing on his head, and the accident left him, his memory was wiped from his childhood, and he wasn't even able to recognise his own family, and had to rebuild his life without having memories from before the car accident, which is just mind-boggling to get your head around that. And obviously tried to get loads of stuff back, and then one night when he was shuffling through an 80s playlist, this song by the Waterboys came on.
I saw the crescent. You saw the whole of the moon.
And Thomas started to get memories back from his childhood off this amazing piece of music. I'm delighted to say that Thomas joins us now. Hi Thomas, welcome to 5 Live.
Oh, it's good to speak to you. How are you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to get this right. Neil and Tony, we're not going to get this right because it's so complicated, so apologies in advance. But
It's fine.
I wanted to tell the part of you having the accident, and that's there, and state what it was,
Sure.
and it was awful. But I'm assuming then once you ended up in hospital, you just woke up and everything was different. Everything was a mystery.
It was complicated because it was, so I'd broken my back as well and other things, and they had to do an operation to take a clot out of my head. So that was kind of how bad it was. So I was very lucky to survive. But yeah, it took a while to kind of figure out what was going on because I was on so many drugs for the pain and all the rest of it. And but also, it's a weird thing. It's quite common apparently with head injuries like this, where you can have this sort of chemical imbalance for a while afterwards that makes you feel, it kind of puts you in a serene state. So you, in a weird sort of way, I don't remember feeling particularly alarmed or anything. I just didn't really know what was going on, but I didn't sort of know any different. And then, it's a really weird thing looking back now, because right now I can't imagine feeling like that in that situation. But
it makes total sense. Tony...
But it's weird because you don't know what you've missed until people start filling you in.
Yeah, because
so
you don't think, I've lost my memory.
Yeah, because you don't know...
You don't know the memories.
Yeah, and in a weird sort of way, I was talking about this earlier, in a weird sort of way, memory is such a funny thing because it's not just as simple as things you forget or remember, because there's what I now know to be called episodic memory, which is remembering that stuff's happened and, remembering things that have happened, and I lost all of that. But you can still sort of have an idea of things, you know, because equally like the language. So I'm so lucky because the left side of my brain wasn't so damaged. So that's where all your language apparently is.
Wow.
Unless I've got that wrong today. I'm very forgetful, funnily enough. So so I'm so lucky because I was able to speak and understand people, and I struggled a bit with reading, but otherwise, it was all good. So I was really lucky because I've met people with similar injuries who lost that but could remember. So it's always different for everybody. And
did you know your own name?
No, it was. It's so funny because my memory of the time was so hazy because, unfortunately, I've lost a lot of memory since then as well. So it's kind of like I have a lot more since then, but it's very patchy. And because my mum and dad were just so glad I was alive, and also it was at a time we didn't have social media still. This was 2003, so it hadn't quite sort of happened, and we didn't really have smartphones in the same way. So there's very little kind of recorded of that. I've got my scans and all that kind of stuff, but also my mum and dad obviously were just like, I can't imagine it.
Yeah.
So I'm a dad now myself, and so obviously they were just glad I was alive and just kind of focused on that. So I don't really know very much about that time.
Yeah.
So, but I do just remember feeling very confused, but kind of going along, oddly enough, just kind of going along with everything. And, even though I do sort of remember when I was at home just being confused about my room and also they didn't realise that I couldn't recognise faces as well. So that's a whole other thing that's come with it. So,
Right.
So even once I'd figured out who was who,
Yeah.
I wouldn't then recognise them. So then they think, oh, have you forgotten?
So this is the bit that ties into a beautiful love story. So even though I said at the top about how the Water Boys brought back memories, we can't even go there yet. So Tony, I want to bring Tony and Neil in here because very much a conversation in the show. I don't want you to feel like you're being interviewed. I want you to feel like one of our mates. So, Tony, imagine. Are you married, Tony? Just out of interest.
No,
We're only getting to know each other. Okay, so imagine you went out on a date, and you went out on a date with somebody, but you knew when you woke up the next morning, you wouldn't be able to recognise the person.
Gosh, that's overwhelming.
Right?
Yeah,
It's a movie. It's a Hollywood movie. It's the type of movie that makes you cry your eyes out, right?
Yeah.
You could fall in love and not know you'd fallen in love the next day.
So I guess my question would be like, where do you get the drive to like keep dating? Like, was there any point where you were like, yeah, this isn't for me? Like, what encouraged you
To get back, yeah.
It's a weird thing because I think you kind of don't. I mean, there were years when when things weren't so together and things were more of a struggle, and also the couple of years I think before I met my wife Sophie, I'd been really struggling because that was when I started having seizures, which is quite a normal thing to develop epilepsy after something like this. So thankfully that's more managed now. But so there was a lot going on, but it was kind of. Yeah, I don't know. I've always been this. It annoys people sometimes how optimistic I am.
Good. Nothing wrong with that.
I think you just kind of. I think it's a weird thing, and I might be right. And don't get me wrong. I've been very down at certain points, but I think there's something weird if you can make it out of those times. There's something where it's like if you have to be hopeful and you have to, if that's all you've got, you really. That's just how you have to be, I think. Yeah. And as I say, I'm not at all saying, because I'm sure there are lots of people fighting hard who are in a very dark place at the moment, and I've been there. So it's not. I'm conscious this week that there's so many people. Obviously, it's a nice story. Yeah. But there will be lots of people really struggling, and I really feel for them right now because it can be really hard.
But that's a sign of you as a human being. There's nothing wrong with your story being one that we can talk about in someone else's story next. But I understand that it's a natural feeling of guilt where you go, well, hold on, there's people worse off than I am. Yeah. But your story's amazing. Neil, check this out, right? Yeah. So he goes on a date has this most amazing date, and this line, even Neil's cold heart will be crushed. Because you absolutely fell in love with this one date. You had a brilliant date, and you had to say at the end of the date, you had to say to her, I won't remember you tomorrow.
Wow.
He's the happiest man in the world, Thomas, isn't he? I'm trying to create.
to laugh now because we're happily married and have kids.
But I mean, spoiled the end of the story.
Sorry.
It does sound like, do you know when you get your friend to text you in the middle of a day if it's not going well? It does sound, Thomas, that you were setting up to, listen, I won't remember you in the morning.
It's a great excuse to get out of dates, isn't it? Yeah.
I mean, surely she was like, oh, well, I haven't heard that one before. I'm massively impressed by that. I'm really curious.
Because you can't... no, sorry, come on.
No, I'm really curious about, you talk about your optimism there. Was that always there before you had your accident? And if not, did you have any personality changes? Because James Cracknell had a head injury, and he talked about the fact that there were personality changes there. Yeah,
he's done a great job sort of raising awareness. It's funny because obviously I don't remember, but my brothers have been, and my sister as well, they've been brilliant at and my in-laws as well. I've got a lot of wonderful people around me, but they've kind of really brought the humour along the whole way, and they were always, my brother's joking about how they much prefer me now. So they were like, sorry it had to happen, but it was kind of, I don't know, I've had so many stories, and to the point where sometimes you're like, are you guys messing with me? Because Yeah,
My brothers
I
would do
lived
that.
it up, I think, before, as a lot of teenagers would at that
Yeah.
age, and probably was a bit of a nightmare.
So
Yeah.
so check this out. This is again. Now, we still haven't done the whole of the moon. We'll go to that next. So what's your wife's name again? Sorry.
Sophie.
Sophie. So
Yeah.
you go on this date, you absolutely think
Yeah.
she's fantastic. So she's got a shock of red hair, is that right?
Yeah.
And her red hair, her hair being dyed red,
Yeah.
allowed you to start being able to remember the next day. And so one of the greatest love stories I've ever heard begins.
Oh my god. Is that a question? I don't know.
That's as if this is the man who's talked non-stop for 15 minutes, and now the cat's got his tongue when we talk about him falling in love. That was she was just this was huge. You did technically fall in love in an impossible situation, and she was such a big part of that, wasn't she? And making sure that you could recognise her and recognise her again.
I mean, the whole thing of saying I won't recognise you tomorrow. Obviously, that is, even if you know something before that, obviously takes a long time to get used to something like that, I'm sure. But because of the extent of literally not being able to recognise anybody and being forgetful, so I had told her before the date the sort of essential, so she knew. So it wasn't sprung on her, because that wouldn't be fair.
Yeah. No, I know that. It was just a lovely story.
But obviously it's still a thing, obviously, and she's amazing, and just because obviously there have been people in the past that not necessarily just partners, but people who weren't so okay with it, and I think and it must be, and I do feel sorry for. There's lots of friends from before as well that I think just couldn't deal with it, and obviously it must have been really weird not having those shared. So I'm really grateful for the friends that did stick around.
100%.
But yeah, I think it is. When I think of it, I'm so we were really cringing with the BBC article when it was first sort of done, because we were like, oh god, But when I think about it, obviously it is. I am a big softie as well, and I can see how, if you didn't know the story before, obviously it is a nice story.
It's a beautiful, beautiful story. It is a wonderful love story in the middle of this, and you're just too close to it. When it becomes normalised for you that you find, Sophie, that the shock of red hair that allowed you to recognise her, building this love and this marriage and bringing these kids into the world.
Don't get me wrong. I am annoyingly sentimental to the
not
point
enough,
where
if you ask me, Thomas. Not enough.
That's one of the things. Waking up in this world in a British family, and them trying desperately to make you more British, and being like, "Who are you? What is this? Where are all these emotions coming from? Could you put them away?"
Yeah.
So. Yeah, that's still a thing. They still haven't succeeded there.
Yeah, right.
So
Can I ask
I get on with Americans because they kind of get me a bit more.
Right, go ahead, you two. What are you saying, Neil?
I was just asking about the practicalities of it. So when you go out with Sophie the first night, right? And I'm not in any way taking the mick here. I genuinely want to know. No, I know it sounds like I am, but I'm not. Are there practical things that you do the next day to remind yourself? Like, do you? Sure. I'm trying not to say the word memento, the film Memento,
no.
But do you know what I mean? Like if you recognise your own handwriting,
don't watch it.
Or maybe you have. Nobody knows. Could you write down the description of Sophie and kind of slowly build a profile of her, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean that's the funny thing with this face blindness thing, is that obviously I can see their face. I know what colour her hair is. I know all that kind of stuff. It's just kind of it's a weird thing to explain because it's so automatic for normal people without this problem. You don't sort of realise how much data, if you like, your brain is processing every time you look at a face, because the faces are extremely complicated things if you just change one little bit. So when I've done these studies where they're fascinated with, particularly when you've acquired it from an injury, like they were really interested. And so they'd like put people I knew and celebrities in amongst all these randoms and stuff, but you'd have no cues with it, so you wouldn't see any other clothing or anything. And you just, it's such a complex thing, and that's why it took them years and years to get facial recognition software, because it is actually really complicated, but it's just such a important thing that you've got. So it's kind of, sorry, I think your question was like...
There was no question. He was inanely rambling.
No,
There was a question in there.
The question was, do you write down notes to build a profile?
Yeah,
I do have to keep notes on lots of people and things in my life, and just things. Also, just my short-term memory, depending on the day, can be really bad. And pretty much every morning, it's quite. We like to just see the funny side of it when you can, but quite often I'm very. I don't know what I can say on this station, but quite annoyed, shall we say, when I think someone's eaten my breakfast in the morning, or I had a nice surprise today when someone magically made my coffee, and I was like, oh, that's pretty good. But it was actually, apparently I'd made it, but whatever.
Right.
And just things like, so it's like, I do have to keep a lot of notes, and just kind of, I was saying to someone earlier in the day about how great for this to happen in this era, because the technology is just so helpful. Like if you imagine this happening before smartphones and before, because I just rely on my phone for so much help. I mean, if I sometimes panic if I think about the idea of losing my phone, because much as you do, we all need a break for them. But just being able to quickly take notes on everything and have notes on who's who and whatever, and even things like telling people where you are, and just having a record of everything that I've said to people, because otherwise there's no hope. Because I just like...
Now, Thomas, on that point of keeping a record, bearing in mind, go to the news in a bit, right?
Sure.
We finally get to this. I don't even want to get to this yet, because there's so many other things I want to ask you. So you have this, where you've consigned an entire childhood and young adulthood to the dustbin. You're not going to remember it. And this song brings back what memories?
Yeah, so this song, when it happened, and I know this in quite a lot of detail because I've been over and over it with everybody since it happened, because obviously it was a big deal.
Huge.
So this was the first time that anything came back after many years of trying to find memories somehow. And I was compiling this playlist for my 30th birthday, and I was born in the 80s, so and I thought I'd heard them all, because I was sort of trying to bring memories back by listening to 80s things and watching movies and whatever. So I thought I'd heard them all, and then for whatever reason this particular track obviously hadn't been on the radio or whatever in all that time, or if it had, it'd been in the background, I didn't notice, or something like that. And then it came on as I was doing this playlist. I pressed skip one more time, and this came on, and it was just the most bizarre, amazing thing, because it was like I was transported. It was like I suddenly saw like this blue floor and this silver hi-fi thing, and then just like was holding this man's hand, and it was just like pop, 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 like all these things just suddenly coming to me, and I was like, what the hell is happening? So it was like, I knew they were memories, but also at the same time it was it kind of almost too good to be. I was kind of scared to believe it as well, and also a lot of the things were very early memories. So some of the things I thought, well, have I sort of skewed that or whatever? And then the next day, so I told Sophie straight away, as I say, I need to keep a record of everything. Yeah. And then the next day, I was on the phone to my mom and checking with my brothers and stuff, and they were like, oh yeah, that was that, and whatever, and so it was so cool, and it was just that really changed everything for me, because it was kind of like, as lovely as stories and photos are, like having something
100%.
real actually in your brain that belongs to you is quite nice.
Did any other songs after this then do the same job, or is it literally just this?
It's funny because there's I can't think of a particular track as such, like as in, but there was one that I do remember which was I was doing one of my random 80s, 90s sort of catch-up things, and I stumbled across The Snowman, which is like this kid's this sort of classic British kids Christmas thing that was on TV at the time.
Yeah.
And it came up, and it's got such an amazing score to it, and the visuals are so different, and it just immediately, I just remembered this thing that turned out to be me at school, and it was just, again, it was just like this bizarre key unlocking type thing. It was just so weird. And yeah, so there've been a few others, but it's funny, sometimes people go, oh, so you got all your memories back, and I'm like, not really. It's like, compared to you, it's like, I have got some memories back now, which is brilliant, but they are, I could count them. Yeah, it's not very many, but it is wonderful, because for so many years I kind of tried to get used to the idea that
you wouldn't have any.
I would have nothing. And I think particularly as you get older and as your parents are getting older, and it was funny because the first few years it didn't really bother me so much, but then as you kind of approach 30, as I was doing, everything kind of becomes about yesterday, and your brothers and your friends are talking about that holiday and wherever and all that kind of stuff. And so it was starting to feel really unfair.
Yeah. Is it true that every time you hear Spandau Ballet's Gold, you lose a memory? Is there a song? Listen,
my God, do you know what? There could be all kinds of things. I wouldn't know. I just assume I'm just dropping memories as I go around. But who knows? Could be my kids. If it was, then that's definitely...
So what admires me about this, Tony, is this character, this enthusiasm, but as he says, the perspective he has is the perspective that Tom has is unbelievable, Tony.
Yeah, no, it is. And I admire it. I'm an optimist as well. And I do feel like if you cannot change something and something is out of your control, there is no point dwelling over it, because you cannot change it, right?
Exactly.
So it's about like how you move forward. So it's inspiring. I really love the way that you have thought about everything and how you deal with everything. Because
I love that you said that as well. Sorry, you finish, and then I want to say something when you're finished.
Oh, no, I was just saying that a lot of people would have allowed it to consume them, and understandably, like I get it, because it's very overwhelming to have lost your memory and to lose faces of people that meant and mean so much to you, and lose these memories. But for you to just move forward and think about the things you can control, I really, really respect and admire that.
Oh, bless you. Thank you. And also, I'm really glad that you said about accepting things, because that for me was really important. And now, what I'm doing now, which is I've written this book, and I still can't quite believe that all this is happening, and that my agents now are like putting it to publishers or whatever, which is just nuts, because I never thought I struggled to read at one point, so it was
no, you're writing books.
Yeah, and it's kind of a core part of the core message of the whole thing, which is that it's okay to not be able to do things, and I think, I know people with a whole range of different disabilities, and we all have certain things in common. Yeah. And unfortunately, one of them is that you just have to accept that there are some things you cannot do. Yeah. And there's a weird sort of liberation in doing that, because it kind of stops you trying to compare yourself to other people and allowing yourself to see how awesome you can be at something, you know? And it's kind of like, I don't mean this because it always comes from a good place, but you know how a lot of people like to say, oh, you can do anything, and if you just put your mind to it, and it's like, well, you can't.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Unfortunately, for some of us.
I tell you one thing I can't do, Thomas. I can't go to news more than 6 or 7 minutes late, or I get sacked, and I'm already 6 minutes late. You've ruined a running order for the best possible reasons, and that's what I like about Sergio's had an official apology. That's what I love about it. I got one final question for you.
Yeah, sure.
Would you remember us tomorrow morning?
Oh, who knows? I hope so.
Literally in your head, you're like,
it's recorded. I will. If you have me back, that would be lovely. But yeah, I'll. No, I won't. And it's all. Can't wait to listen again. And no, I really, really appreciate you guys talking to me tonight. So.
I love it, Thomas. I could keep you on for 2 hours.
Thank you. And if people want to keep in touch or find out about the books, they can look me up on Twitter or whatever.
What's the handle for your Twitter?
It's just Thomas Leeds.
At Thomas
Yeah,
Leeds.
Leeds like
Spelt
the
like
city.
Leeds, like the place, right?
Yeah.
That's brilliant. Thomas, absolute
Thank you so
ledge.
much.
Thanks for coming on.
You're the
Appreciate
best.
that. Appreciate that.
Love you guys. Thank you so
Love
much.
you too, mate. Love you too.
Take care.
What a
Thanks,
guest.
Thomas.
There was just nothing to do, was there, Neil and Tony, but just listen to his story.
Oh yeah,
He's
he's a remarkable man, and I can't wait to follow like how that progresses. Will other things, other songs, will olfactory cues? Apparently, smell is a huge link to memory. Will they spark more things off? But what a great positive man.
Unbelievable. Right, we're way behind, which means we'll squeeze loads into the last. We'll try and tell. Have a wee look and see, but it doesn't matter. That's what live radio is meant to be, and especially late night, where you can afford to just go, this is the conversation we're having. And you might think, why was that the happy hour? Why do I want to put that in the happy hour? I think now you've heard from Thomas, you know exactly why it should go in the happy hour. And as we go to Sergio for the news, so I want to say something I was quite envious about when he was telling that story. He met his love, and every day he gets to fall back in love with her for the very first time, which is just one of the most beautiful thoughts. Every day almost he gets to fall in love with her again, which is just stunning. Right, let's get the latest news with Sergio.
Listen on BBC Sounds. This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
Colin,